Serious, therapists of Reddit, what are some red flags we should look for in therapists? If they immediately try to present you with answers to all of your problems, not lead you to your own solutions. There is a major distinction there. I went to the first initial therapy session. I explained that I had just broken up with my boyfriend, transferred from what I thought was my dream school to a local school and was considering going back to the first school, and how lonely I was. She told me that the initial therapy session was just to talk about my goals but was not a legit session. The only thing she told me to prepare for next session was to look at college majors between the two schools. I came back the next session, ready with all my school information about what majors stood out to me, and she berated me for still feeling unhappy and lonely and seemed pissed that I didn't do any self-work in the week between the initial consultation and the first real session. She kept saying therapy isn't magic and that if I wanted to see results, I needed to put in the work outside the session. We didn't even get into the actual therapy yet. She insisted I only wanted to go back to my original school because it's a party school and I wanted to party. Not true at all. Told me I was an enabler because I was okay with my ex being tipsy around me, even though we also agreed that he's not an alcoholic. Told me that I made a lot of mistakes. It scared me away from therapy for a year. I finally went back to free counseling sessions offered through my university and my new therapist was absolutely incredible. Completely changed my whole view of therapy. My university therapist was amazing too. He was the first person to ever say to me, "Thanks for sharing that with me." I now use that phrase in my day-to-day life to respond when people are vulnerable with me. This is awesome. Thanks for sharing that with me, smile. If they start most of their responses with "at least" and then try to put a silver lining on it instead of honoring your pain and what you shared with them. Edit, my use of the word honor in this context is meant to convey that you take a person's hurt and trauma seriously. Don't diminish or downplay what someone went through or how it affected them. Instead, respect what they've been through and how they got through it so you can focus on healing. Edit 2, thank you to the people that reminded me of Brené Brown's silver lining at talk. It is the perfect example, much better said, and even illustrated in an awesome YouTube video that helped me put this phenomenon into words. Damn. I'm not a therapist, but I think I do have a bad habit of doing this when my friends are venting to me. I'm going to knock that off immediately. Yeah, most people don't want that. Here a 3-step guide to be a good supportive listener. 1. Validate. Wow, that does suck. 2. Sympathize. I'm sorry you're going through that. 3. Empathize. I wouldn't want to through that either. Here is where you can offer advice if they are looking for advice. If it were me, I would do this. Just remember, some teens people just want to vent and aren't necessarily looking for advice. Do whatever variation of this needed and you will be a happy supportive listener and hopefully make the person venting feel better. Edit, Holy Awards Batman. Thank you so much, lovely people of Reddit. If they work at a lot of things about themselves and their lives. Therapist checks for messages during session. Therapist pushes their own religious views on their client. It's a stupid mistake, but it's common. Therapist discloses content of the sessions to third parties. Exceptions to this rule are consultation, clinical supervision, when a therapist seeks a senior or colleagues for technical advice, or when patient's life is at risk. Therapist flirts with client. Edit for formatting and terminology. Isn't disclosing the content of sessions, sans the patient being at risk of harm, to a third party super illegal? Breaking confidentiality laws and all that? If therapy is under HIPAA, then if they remove identifying information they're allowed to talk about it. Edit to clarify, I meant if HIPAA applies, because they're in the United States. I have no idea about the law in other countries, though I can't imagine they wouldn't have this exception because of how important it is to medical personnel. Edit it again because my phone recognizes both HIPAA and I didn't know which was right. It's worth noting that anonymized data is an incredibly useful thing. There are tons of scientific studies that have given needed insight into mental health conditions that wouldn't be possible without it, so therapists sharing anonymized data isn't necessarily a bad thing, but definitely ask them if they share it and who with. If they keep validating that it's okay you feel the way you do, but offer no alternative way of thinking. Keep in mind that a lot of therapists want challenge thinking until rapport and trust is built. At the beginning of therapy, you both are strangers, so therapist validating you and working to understand the problem is an important part of the process. Super important. I know someone who deals with trauma-related issues and is highly therapy averse. They finally got into a therapist's office a few years back, and the therapist questioned them aggressively and then wrapped up the session by declaring, "So you were abused as a child, right?" Needless to say, they are still suffering, and will probably never again reach out for professional help no matter how bad it gets. All relationships are trust-based. A shitty therapist assumes that their profession creates that trust automatically. If they start pushing their religious beliefs on you. I go to a clinic that has a ton of Christian therapists. They advertise as offering religion in their therapy on request only. So my therapist on the first visit asked if I wanted spiritual guidance or religious incorporation. I'm Christian, but I said no. I've had enough of other Christians giving me heaps of shit for my problems. He has never brought up anything religious since then and focuses instead on cognitive behavioral therapy and meditation self-awareness, as well as giving me weekly practical homework. I've made huge progress and now only need to see him bi-weekly now instead of weekly. Smile. When your therapist is sure that you told them things you never did, and hold those things against you. Had a psychiatrist like that once, glad I got a new one. The things she held against me made me look like I was actually crazy. She never held anything against me, but my therapist has thought I told her things when I didn't and insisted she's never heard of things people that I've mentioned multiple times. Sounds like she brought the wrong notes to the session. Therapist here. My role is a little different as I am a trauma-based short-term crisis therapist, meaning I just help stabilize my clients to where they can be transferred to a lower level of care. To me, warning flags are no risk assessment, no crisis planning, no exploring triggers, no plan to help you cope when faced with a trigger, especially important when triggered and out of session, no timeline for treatment, no discussion about your rights as a patient, too much advice giving. I call this could've, should've, would've people, also giving advice about anything outside of their scope of practice, medical treatment, religious practices, legal issues, etc., in family couples sessions especially. Any therapist who acts like a referee to determine who is right or wrong covering these items are important in therapy because it will help the patient long-term in processing emotions, using healthy coping skills and problem solving on their own. I can't speak to those clinicians in private practice because I'm in community mental health, but for agency-based therapy, it is not a long-term service. Most CMH agencies are bound by evidence-based practices, which are time-limited and short-term, 6 to 12 weeks. I would be wary of a therapist who seems like they are dragging out your treatment. The goal is progress, not perfection. I'd like to take this time to remind everyone that it's important to find a therapist with whom you can click. If their personality is a clash with yours or their modality doesn't work for you, it's fine to find someone else. Hell, it's expected. This is kind of my own personal style showing in a way, but I'm of the opinion that if every session the therapist is talking more than the client, there's something very wrong. It's a little normal for them to interrupt you to focus on something you said here and there, or direct you if you lose your way, but if they're yammering on and you can't even talk about what you wanted to, I'd say that's a pretty big red flag for me. That said, I'd still say give it a couple sessions before deciding on that, because the first session can often mean a lot of information gathering, so they have to touch on a lot of things. If a therapist doesn't give you an informed consent. If a therapist doesn't thoroughly explain his or informed consent to make sure you understand. If a therapist doesn't listen to your needs. If a therapist says they are a therapist, CBT, DBT, psychoanalytic, etc., and they don't listen to your individual needs. If a therapist reroutes all your problems back to some aspect of your life. For example, if a therapist tries to make every problem in your life about your sexuality even when they are unrelated. Overall, if it feels like you aren't being heard and understood, red flag. More so, if it feels like the therapist isn't trying to understand your point of view. Not keeping professional boundaries, like sharing personal information about themselves. Giving you direct advice about a serious decision, like a breakup, expressing their personal opinion strongly. Any sign of judging your decisions, opinions or feelings. Therapist here. The big three are as follows. Talking about themselves in a way that is too detailed or detracts the attention and focus from you. Advice giving. We are not here to tell you what to do. Not referring you on when an issue is out of their competency. For example, attempting to treat LGBTQ issues without training or skills with that particular population. A few things come to mind right away. 1. Is there any good reason to know about their ex-husband, kids, pets, son-in-law, etc.? I think not. For $100 plus for 45 minutes, the focus should be completely on the patient too. Should be number 1, are they licensed LMAO and is their office legit? You can check their license number, which should be readily available on their business card, invoice hung up on office wall. Ask for it. Does it look like a business office or an isolated deserted building with just you in them? Do you get a creepy vibe? 3. Do you feel better or worse after you walk out? Do they approach problems with assurances or just make you feel bad about yourself? Do you go home with new tactics or strengthened tactics to deal with your life? 4. Are they building you up to function well on your own? Do they measure success by you not always needing sessions? Are they happy for you when you are stable enough to dial back frequency of sessions? 5. Are you practicing techniques in your sessions that can be used when you are on your own? Are they holding you hostage as a place to spill your guts, or are they teaching you to practice their methods across multiple parts of your life?